What's going on, YouTube? I've spent just over a week with the latest and greatest that Samsung has to offer in the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. Overall, it has been a very complete experience. There's a lot to go over on this phone, so forgive me if this turns into a long video. First off, I want to get into the overall design language of this year's Galaxy flagships. Both the front and the back of these handsets is covered with Gorilla Glass 5. On the back, we have our flash and heart rate monitor buried beneath the back panel glass, doing away with the plastic covers of old. Just to the right of these, we have our 13 megapixel sensor, which is not a huge generational jump from the Galaxy S7 Edge, but does feature a new sensor and better post-processing. This year's camera sensor is completely flush, save for a tiny metal ring to protect it from scratches and damage. Living right next to this, we have our fingerprint sensor, which has caused quite a stir among the tech world. To me, it is not that bad of placement. I have not had a problem hitting it every time, and it feels natural to my hands. The bottom of the phone rests neatly in my palm, and my fingertip hits the sensor perfectly. However, this is my personal use case. I do have rather large hands, and it is not a stretch for me on the S8 Plus. Moving down to the lower area of the back of this handset, we can see a Samsung logo, and further down are FCC labels. I wish that Samsung would copy LG and omit these labels for an S8 or S8 Plus logo. This would make for a much cleaner design. Spinning the phone around, we can see that massive display with just a hint of bezel, boasting an overall screen-to-body ratio of 84%. Samsung has managed to cram a crazy amount of sensors and lights into the tiny top bezel as well, which is quite an astounding feat of cell phone engineering. From left to right, we have our LED notification light, IR emitter for the iris scanner, proximity sensor, ambient light sensor, earpiece, front-facing 8 megapixel camera, and our iris scanning camera. It may seem like a lot, but all of these sensors are very useful in everyday usage of the phone, and I am glad to see the return of the notification LED, a much missed feature on the LG G6. Moving on to the bottom bezel, we can see that the hardware navigation keys, a design principle of Samsung for ages, has been replaced by screen, which I thought at first would be a hindrance to the overall experience, whereas I have always been a fan of hardware navigation keys over software. However, Samsung's implementation is the best that I have ever used. They have substituted for a under-the-screen home button, which is very intuitive and always on, even when the display is not, so you can wake the phone as if there was a button there. Props for that, Samsung. This is an improvement in my book. One thing I do have to point out is that the haptic feedback could be much more localized for the hard press, whereas it feels closer to the center of the phone rather than right underneath the button. These sacrifices in button hardware are well worth it for the addition of that 6.2-inch screen on the S8 Plus and a 5.8-inch screen on the standard S8. This is one of the best displays I've ever seen on any smartphone, and the immersion when watching any kind of media content or playing any games is absolutely impeccable. Next, we will take a look at the buttons that this phone actually has. So to the left here, we have our volume rocker, which is nice and clicky, but all one piece. I was much more fond of last year's separated volume rocker, which gave you a distinction of up and down without having to feel around when not looking. It was also much more aesthetically pleasing. Living below our volume rocker is a button that, in my opinion, should not be there, the Bixby button. Samsung's attempt at an artificial intelligence assistant. I played around with the Bixby button for an entire day, and as of now, it's a bunch of cards that are rather useless, whereas most all this information is one click away anyways. As well as a Bixby Vision feature, which 9 times out of 10 did not recognize what I was showing it in the first place. For my personal usage, I could see the Bixby Vision feature being very useful once it has been much more refined. However, the rest of the Bixby package is more of a job for the Google Assistant, which is why I found a third-party app to remap the Bixby button to my Google Assistant, a feature that Samsung should have baked into the settings. In my opinion, the whole Bixby button was no more than a marketing trick in order to increase revenue on the Galaxy S8 lineup. Enough said. On the right side of the phone, we have the power button, which is nice and clicky. Moving to the top of the phone, we have our microSD and SIM card slot. To the right of this, we have a noise-canceling microphone for voice calls. This also works when recording audio for stereo recording in conjunction with the mic on the bottom. And moving on to the bottom of the phone, now we have our headphone jack. Thank you, Samsung, for having the courage to leave it on the phone. Next to that, we have our USB Type-C, a welcome upgrade over the micro USB of last year. To the right of the charging port, we have our secondary microphone and the loudspeaker, which is much better quality over last year's, however, just as easy to cover up when using the phone in landscape orientation. Now that we have the basics covered, I want to point out some design changes from last year's S7 Edge that make the S8 and S8 Plus much easier to hold. First off, Samsung has opted to make the curvature the same on the front and back of the devices, and the metal frame is melded with the glass much more smoothly than that of the S7 Edge, making for a near seamless feeling when holding the device. Also, the curvature of the glass and screen is much less abrupt than that of last year, aiding in the end of accidental palm presses when holding the phone. Alongside this design change, Samsung has also much improved the palm rejection compared to the S7 Edge of last year. Overall, they have come leaps and bounds in design language, doing a few slight tweaks to curvature and software, making the usage a much more pleasant experience than its predecessor. Moving on to the software on this beast of a phone, Samsung has made major improvements over the cartoony, buggy TouchWiz of old. Don't get me wrong though, there are still bugs and glitches here and there, but nowhere near as bad as previous iterations of Samsung's user interface. The new Samsung experience is truly a great experience with these new handsets. The new carousel app drawer is intuitive and easy to use, especially one-handed, rather than having to stretch out to hit an app drawer icon. The addition of Smart Select from the Note series is a very welcome and well-used feature, and the major refinement of the theming engine and theme store are also very welcome changes. Another noteworthy new software feature is app management in the app drawer and home screen alike. The long press 3D touch style menu is very nice, and the fact that you can move multiple applications at once is a long-awaited feature now delivered. The elimination of finding the option to edit the app drawer layout in a hamburger menu has been done away with for a nice long press on any app and simply drag it where you want it. If you wish to send an app to the home screen, simply bring it to the blue area at the top or bottom and place it where you want it. These small changes to the software truly make the biggest difference in ease of use for day-to-day tasks. So far, performance has been buttery smooth and on point for a 2017 flagship. That matched with the astounding battery life courtesy of the 3500 mAh power pack. This truly is an all-day warrior for the most power-hungry of users. The power-sipping 10nm Snapdragon 835 mixed with its Adreno 540 graphics processing unit account for the excellent performance, mixed in with the 4GB of RAM and 64GB of storage. This is truly a power user's kind of phone. The battery life was truly shocking to me, though, considering that the S8 Plus has a smaller battery compared to its predecessor, but a much larger 6.2-inch display. Samsung has truly worked hard on optimizing this phone so as to give the user the most amount of usage with the best on-screen experience as possible. However, this hasn't done much for software updates, whereas at the time of this recording, my S8 Plus is still stuck on Android 7.0, but much cheaper phones like the OnePlus 3T have already moved on to the even more battery-friendly 7.1.1. Hopefully, as we always say, Samsung can step up their update game in the near future. In conclusion, this is an amazing piece of hardware that I would recommend to anyone not on a budget. And that brings me to the biggest flaw of the S8 and S8 Plus, which is the astounding price tag. I paid a staggering 1,282 Canadian dollars after tax for the S8 Plus. I would feel much better about this handset if the price stopped at 1,000 Canadian. However, as we as consumers demand more and more features, the manufacturer demands more and more money. So as they say, you have to pay to play. And for me, this hardware is just too good to pass up. If there is any specific feature you would like me to cover more in depth on the S8 or S8 Plus, please feel free to leave a request in the comments. Stay posted for my camera review and camera comparisons. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.